You are going to need this video if you're starting an Airbnb business in 2023. As an Airbnb host who's made over $10 million on the space, I can tell you it's completely different now than it was when I got started back in 2015. In this video, I'm going to tell you what I would do if I was getting started in 2023 instead of 8 years ago. And yes, a lot of this is completely different than my approach way back then, because also way back then, I was a complete newbie. I had no clue what I was doing aside from the other businesses that I already built. So yes, in a way, I had a head start. If this is your first time starting a business, it might seem overwhelming, but that's why I'm here for you to give these videos. I've built 4 7-figure businesses, and I'm going to pull some of the best advice I can give you from all of my companies to help you start an Airbnb one. Let's get into the video. What is different about Airbnb and short-term rentals now as opposed to 15 years ago? Let me give you a quick list. First, there are way more hosts. Because this industry has gotten popular, there are way more people in the space trying to make money. 2, some of those hosts are venture capital-backed companies that have hundreds of millions of dollars. Some of them have even gone public since. That's how the VC world works, right? Somebody gives you $10 million to grow a company and they want a big payday. So Sonder took hundreds of millions of dollars from investors, and then they went public on the open markets for $1.8 billion. And that success story in the space has only further created more investments into the Airbnb world. 3, the guests have completely changed. Back in 2015, people were considered early adopters onto the Airbnb platform. They were doing something new. They knew they were doing something new, and they were excited about it. So they were way more forgiving and open-minded about what their experience could be on Airbnb because no one's really defined the standard of service yet. Now in 2022, 2023, people have used Airbnb so much, and the regular community of people who typically go to hotels but are now moving to Airbnb for options alone, they aren't so open-minded to change necessarily. They want to see more standardization in the Airbnb community. They want to see more hotel-like consistency in order to use the platform. And this has actually been really bad for Airbnb lately. It's really affected them in the news and their stock valuation because hosts, providers like us, if we are good at what we do, we could go direct and start getting our own bookings and people will come and see us because they're not loyal to Airbnb. They just want to stay somewhere and they want some consistency. And this leads to number 4, which is that Airbnb is being seen more and more like just a software. That shiny object syndrome is going away. So hosts and guests alike are making some key changes in the space. And guests are either going back to hotels or getting vocal on social media about their negative experiences with Airbnb. It's just way less of just a cool thing to do anymore. So what does that mean for you today? If you're going to get started on Airbnb right now, you can do what I would do if I was new, knowing all of these things. Number 1 includes a quick detour for you to hit that subscribe button at the bottom because I'm going to teach you everything you need to know. I already have a free course on here, by the way. It's a playlist here on YouTube. Just check out that free course and learn everything. But yes, number 1 is market research. I just did a webinar on this. I'm not going to try to get all up in your face about the webinar, but it is available for you still if you want it. But what market research can give you is where the best neighborhoods are and the best property types for those neighborhoods. An example of this is during that webinar, I showed people how to do market research on the luxury market, which is not a market I recommend you get started in if you're brand new. I'll tell you why here in a second, but we are able to filter properties that are $2,000 a night or more and just take a look at only those properties with market research. And then we did something called an absorption check. We can see how many listings exist in an area, and then we can see how many of those listings are getting booked by the time today arrives, when you're no longer able to book. So if a market has 500 total properties in a data set that you're pulling, but then only 50 of those properties are left last minute available to book, that means that 90% of them have gotten booked. And what that market research example showed is I showed all of South Florida, like Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and their luxury market actually books less, about 15% less of their inventory gets booked, which means there's less demand than Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas has higher demand per available property in the luxury space as opposed to Miami. I don't think many people were expecting to see that. Market research isn't some superficial thing that you just spend an hour on. What I mean by doing market research, if you're going to do this like me, I would identify 20 separate neighborhoods in multiple cities and then multiple neighborhoods within those cities to do a check. To do that absorption check that I just talked about, the way that you would do it is you would start with an I'm flexible search in any neighborhood. Select any weekend for the next 6 months and hit go. And then zoom into that neighborhood until you see in the top left corner where it says 1,000 plus properties available. Just make sure that that number is under 1,000, okay? This is going to show you the total number of properties available in that neighborhood. I call this a global search because we're searching every weekend for the next 6 months. That's 24 or 26 separate searches, and almost all listings should show up in that search range. Then flip from I'm flexible to choosing specific dates. What you do is you go to the very next available weekend. So if today is Wednesday, you're searching just a couple days into the future for Friday and Saturday. Basically, you're changing the search from all weekends to just one. That last minute search is going to give you only the leftover listings. All the rest of them should be booked. And so when you switch from I'm flexible to the next weekend, you're going to notice that that number that was 500 or something is going to be smaller. It could be 50, it could be 150, it could be 250, but then that becomes a fraction. There's 50 left over above 500 that existed. What's 50 over 500? That's 1 over 10. That means 9 out of 10 listings got booked. That's how you do an absorption check. And you're going to do this in all 20 neighborhoods for whatever parameter you are thinking you want to get into. If you're looking at luxury properties, you can take that price toggle that's in the filters section and just take the bottom all the way up until you're at over $1,000 a night or something like that. If you wanted to check just houses, you could click just houses. If you want to check just apartments, you can click just apartments. If you want to click just places that have hot tubs or pools or gyms, you can refine your search to see how many properties exist in a neighborhood that meet your parameters. They can sleep 5 people, that have a gym, that are luxury. And then you do that last minute search to see how many of those got booked. By doing this in all 20 neighborhoods, you can identify the top 2 or 3 neighborhoods that have the highest absorption, where most of those properties are getting booked for the property type that you think you want to service. Now, if you don't even know what property types you want to get into yet, if you have no clue on what to do to get into space, whether or not you want to do apartments or houses or whatever, I teach market research for free on this YouTube channel. There are past videos, but you can also take that 2-hour webinar and just get all the things that you need right there. There is a link still in the description for that. Moral of the story though, 20 neighborhoods is a lot of neighborhoods to do research in. The more data, the better, because if you do your market research, you can find what I call underserviced amenities, which vary by neighborhood. So there could be a neighborhood that has too many pools. There could be a neighborhood that doesn't have enough pools. And this market research will show you where a pool will go a longer way. You will also find underserviced guest counts. You can find out how many listings exist per guest by basically doing the same thing I taught you with MapView and just keep switching the search from 4 guests to 5 to 6 to 7. You're going to notice that between 5 and 6 or 6 and 7 or 7 and 8, that the number of listings just fall off a cliff. All of a sudden, there's not many listings at all. That's a relatively large drop for a 1 guest change. That's an opportunity right there. I taught that 4 years ago on this YouTube channel, maybe 5 now. And that's still very much valid for your market research. At the end of all your market research, you'll have looked at 20 different neighborhoods. You'll have identified 3 neighborhoods with really strong demand. And then you'll go do what I call competitor analysis, is where you look at individual listings in those neighborhoods, looking for your best competition. You can look at their calendars and see what days they're booked. You can see how much they're charging. You can reverse engineer all of their listings. Now, you're looking for the best listings in order to copy those listings or copy aspects of those listings. Then you're also looking for the worst listings, the ones that aren't doing very well, and try to find out why these listings are not doing well. If you can find what you would call an objectively good listing that isn't getting bookings, that's a huge red flag. But if you can go into that listing and find out why they're not doing well, for example, maybe the only difference with that listing and the listings that are getting bookings is that it charges $200 a night more and they never change their prices. They don't do dynamic pricing, or they have a 5-day minimum that they never change, and that's just too long, and people are booking 3 or 4 days, so they keep falling out of search because they have a 5-day minimum. Those are 2 valid reasons why they may not be getting bookings. If you can identify this kind of problem, now you're finding competition that you're going to beat because you can be better than your competition. There's competition making mistakes. What's more to this, if you can find a listing that you would call objectively not good, like their photos aren't good, lighting is terrible in those photos, they don't change their prices at all ever, they have a 3 or 4 day minimum all the time, they're making some mistakes as hosts, but they're still making money, their calendar is still filling up, that means that bad hosts are making money, which is a great market for you to get into. See, this is the power of market research. It prevents you from wasting money. Now remember, we're talking about getting started again. If I was brand new to this, by the way, guys, when I got started, I started my first Airbnb for $4,000 back in 2015. Before I started my first Airbnb, I started a newspaper business selling newspaper subscriptions. And before that, I was homeless living out of a Mazda MPV van selling teeth whitening kits inside of Walgreens. I'd set up a little demo table with the permission of the manager of the store and sell these little teeth whitening kits for like 40 bucks a piece. It was such a hustle. So let me tell you, before I got into Airbnb, my experience had nothing to do with this, which should be inspiring for you. You don't have to be a hospitality professional to get into the space. And yes, that means I also was not a real estate professional. I still to this day don't own a single property, and I've made tens of millions of dollars on Airbnb. That might also inspire you as well. But on to number 2, I would take advantage of the state of the industry right now, which is that people are quitting. A lot of people are quitting. And I'm seeing it on Facebook. I've seen it for the last 4 or 5 months. People are selling entire apartments worth of furniture or entire houses worth of furniture. So if you can identify design styles that work in the neighborhoods you've researched, right? Because you did the market research and you go, oh, this style works. Go find Facebook groups, even in neighboring cities or even like 3 hours away cities, and find used furniture that people are selling on the super cheap that match what your design style could be. Because, especially with a house, for example, you could spend $15,000 to $25,000 on new furniture for a house. And if somebody joined Airbnb, didn't do their homework, wasn't watching this YouTube channel, didn't do any dynamic pricing, was using a co-host because they're just like a passive investor, and things fell apart, they're going to sell off that furniture. And it's a little hard to sell an entire apartment or entire home with the furniture fast. So what happens is that $25,000 worth of stuff might go for 10. Man, it might even go for 8 or 7. That'd be wild, right? To save $10, $15, or $20,000 on your startup costs for a whole house with the furniture, good furniture, that would be awesome. All you have to do is rent a U-Haul, take a 2-hour drive to a neighboring city, load up, and come back. That would save you thousands of dollars. When I did this, I bought a bunch of used furniture for my first couple of apartments, and I went to like antique places and just different spots, and I did some Facebook Marketplace stuff. Cool. Then I got into buying everything new using Amazon and Wayfair or whatever. But right now, because there's brand new-ish furniture on sale because people are quitting, it's the best time to buy furniture private party. You should do that instead. But things I didn't do with my design back then. Not only did I just buy ragtag furniture, I didn't paint, I didn't use wallpaper, I didn't have fake plants, I didn't have stand-up mirrors, I didn't have decor. People in my reviews back in 2015 described one of my units as stark, right? Look at that word, stark. Not like Game of Thrones, like barren stark. And it's been a long time coming since then, but what I can tell you is I was profitable as a not good host back in 2015. So yes, you don't have to be necessarily good at everything. There's going to be some opportunities here. I just did research in a town outside of Boston for one of my students. Outside of Boston, 0 artwork making nearly $750 a night. It's wild. So I would do some painting. I would do some wallpaper. I'd have some fake plants. I'd have some stand-up mirrors. I'll add those extras because right now, more than ever, I think the main competitive advantage of any Airbnb listing is a dedicated, unique design approach, something quality. And like I said, we're going to copy the best listings. So your listing's not going to be unique per se, but the best listings should always be booked anyway. So after those best listings are already booked, you're going to be the one left with that design style because the other one's already booked. So after that other best listing gets booked, you're going to be the only one left with that design style because you copied one that the calendar's always full anyway. And it only matters that you copy them when they have availability. And they're likely not going to have availability because you're copying the best, the stuff that's always booked. You get it? If you only did those two things, your results would be night and day different from most of the people who have been getting in the space the last 6 months. You would absolutely crush it. But there is a third thing that I objectively did wrong when I got into the space that I think you could change right away, which is that I took too long to do some key things. There's some key milestones as a business owner here that you should do right away. I did not scale for 2 years. I was too distracted by my newspaper business. I only started scaling once I found out that Houston was going to host the Super Bowl. And that was 2017, 2 years into my start on Airbnb. So I got to about 10 doors right before the Super Bowl hit. And at that scale, I was able to start doing some really cool stuff. I was able to start hiring housekeepers by the hour, which is something you can do if you have 5 or 10 apartments or a few houses. You can mix in hourly staff. And this is a highly controversial topic in this space, but most flat rate housekeepers, the ones with bunches of experience, they charge a huge premium. If you understand how businesses work and how they generate value, you can go find a person with no experience in an industry, get them for a lower hourly rate, and then provide them full training. This is a little bit risky, but what you're doing is you're creating housekeepers. And by creating your own housekeepers, you get their loyalty and you've created a more valuable person than you initially hired. See, when you hire somebody with 0 experience, they're currently at a value. When you give them full industry training, they are now worth more, but they already agreed to less because you're the one who's creating the value with them. Now, over time, you're going to give them raises. And yes, there's a risk that they could leave you and become independent. But I'll tell you, in the 8 years that I've done this, I've been hiring housekeepers by the hour for about 5 years, and we have really good retention. People don't leave because they don't want to go freelance. We give them enough work to not have to worry about it within our company. And that is an advantage that it took me over 2 years to realize that scale could get me there. Scale also has benefits to your pricing strategy because when you have lots of properties, you can do something called PACE, which is a high-level pricing strategy thing that we don't talk about in this video, but with scale gives you high-level advantages. You get the data. With scale, you can split test design styles. I have about a dozen properties in Austin, and I painted them all 4 different color schemes to see which ones are the most popular. I thought my green design or my blue design would be best, but my black one and my pink one are the 2 that are actually doing the best. I can take that data, and when I expand more in Austin, I can do more of what's working. Scale lets you split test. Way cool. And scale lets you build teams, not just cleaners, but you can have your own VAs. You can have your own customer service staff, and you can hire a supervisor. That way you can have a couple days off a week or 3 days off a week, and you can start to think more clearly because you're not just insanely busy all the time with your company. And of course, to automate, you need teams. You cannot automate in this industry with just software. That's impossible. We're in the hospitality space, which means that humans need someone else to be hospitable, to be there for them, to customer service them, to help them with their problems. And I will tell you, guests lose IQ points when they travel. And I don't mean to be rude, but somebody could be super intelligent at home, but for some reason that nervous energy and being in a new city, they all of a sudden get really dumb a lot of times. And they'll ask you the most mundane questions that they kind of know the answer to, but they don't feel like thinking. So you have to have humans ready for anything in the hospitality space. And not just scaling, but I didn't go multi-platform until I already had over 100 properties. I didn't touch VRBO until over 100 properties. We took a small stab at Booking.com and it was a mess. And I'll tell you still to this day, Booking.com is a really tough channel to be multi-channel. So my tips for you on multi-channel. If you're in the United States, do VRBO as your second channel. If you're in Europe or South America, do Booking.com as your second channel, and then pick up the other one third. Now, the thing about Booking.com is it's really clunky, and their policies with reservations and refunds are kind of weird, and people can book your place without paying because it was built for hotels, and a lot of hotels you pay when you arrive. And Booking.com tried to charge us for guests that never arrived because we set up our listings wrong. But the cool thing about Booking.com is you can use Stripe or something to charge a guest in advance and you get that money right away. So Booking.com can give you cash for reservations that are in 2 weeks or 4 weeks when you use different settings, which is cool. So Booking.com is not all bad, but you really have to get good at this to get on Booking.com. And the more channels you have, the more work that it is. And once you hit 3 channels, you'll want like a dedicated channel management software that's really good at what it does. If you just use Airbnb and VRBO or Airbnb and Booking.com and that's it, you can use a simple one like HostHub. It just connects your calendar and it gives you a unified visual calendar so you can use it to manage your cleaning team, which is nice. But then if you have 3 channels or more, then you need something that helps you distribute prices more easily. Like you have one pricing software and it pushes to 3 or 4 channels so you can update your prices on all platforms, stuff like that. If you get to that point, I recommend HostFully, use technology like that. I will tell you that because my channel used to be called Airbnb Automated, I was dedicated to a couple things: only using the Airbnb platform, building without softwares, proving that you could do this in very simple ways. And that's taught me so much about this industry, doing everything the hard way. And I will tell you, there are aspects of this industry that if you do it the hard way, there are huge advantages to that. Too many hosts get started and then they try to add on all these softwares. They try to add on something like HostFully or Guesty right away. They try to use lock automation services right away. They try to use Price Labs or Wheelhouse right away. And the thing is if you use Wheelhouse or Price Labs right away and you know nothing about pricing strategy, it's driving the car for you and you have no clue how the laws of the road work. And you're actually going to lose money in some cases using a software that you don't know how to use, because in order to use a pricing software, you need to understand pricing. So that's one of those things that you should do the hard way, which is by hand for months, just for a few months. Use the free playlist on pricing strategy on this channel and learn pricing strategy before you use Wheelhouse or Price Labs. But software can be helpful. It can help you leverage your team. If you have a few VAs, if you've got some housekeepers, if you've got one manager, they can do a lot more work with the help of software. So I'm not saying don't use any software anymore, but don't go nuts on software, because what you'll do is you'll kind of remove the human element of your business too early on. And as you grow, you need to find a way to make your people more productive without losing the human touch. Because like I said, we're in hospitality. Never lose the human touch, because your 5-star reviews will be based on whether or not another human felt like you were human enough with them most of the time. If they feel like you boxed them out, weren't giving them responses, weren't helping them with things, they will give you retaliatory lower reviews because they feel kind of scorned or they feel kind of not seen or not heard. And that is the heart of the review system on Airbnb. Service people, just make them feel heard, make them feel seen, make them feel accommodated. And now you have an advantage over 90% of other hosts because they have too much software and you get to win the game. Questions, go in the comments. I'll be down there to talk to you on this video. So thank you so much for being here. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.